On this episode of Money and Power, I talk to a friend of the show, a budding entrepreneur, and Justin Powell. But first, Kid Ink.
I got the money and the power. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough what it's you on. Really ain't nothing I can try.
Welcome to episode 33 of Money and Power, our weekly look at questions related to finance, politics, and culture. Tonight, I, Jeremiah Martin, am your host, and joining me from Michigan, a financial consultant and host of two other shows on the Infinity Podcast Network, Rob Talks Money and Apologetics 105. Thanks for joining me tonight, Rob Johnson.
Hey, how's it going?
Doing great. As you know, Rob, and for our listeners' edification, Nathan is out of town. He has ditched us once again. And typically what we do is when one of us can't make it on the show, we will bring in a pinch hitter. We will bring in a guest host. But tonight we have something really special. We've got a great show lined up for tonight. We'll be having a small business / entrepreneur roundtable where we're bringing in a couple friends of ours who are small business owners, who are entrepreneurs, a couple of them serial entrepreneurs, and we're going to talk about exactly that. We're going to talk about all things business and entrepreneurship. So it is going to be a fantastic show. But before we get to that, how have you been doing, Rob?
Good. It's been a good week. I wrapped up the Flip Challenge this week. Final count was 21 phones, and it was good.
That's awesome. I'm all joking aside, I know we give you a hard time, but I'm kind of impressed. I'm just waiting for just kind of wondering when the free phones are going to come my way. That's kind of what
right.
I'm.
Yeah, I almost did a phone a day. I was very close. So.
That's great. Well, yeah. So your Thanksgiving went pretty well.
Yeah, it went really well. It was a very busy weekend, but it went well. What about yours?
Yeah, same thing here. Busy weekend, but yeah, it was good. Got to spend time with my family, with my wife's family. And she had her sister and brother-in-law come up from Tennessee, and so we kind of had a bunch of family, a lot of things going on. And Nathan is now post Thanksgiving, as if all of the food that surely he ate. As if that wasn't enough, he has left for a week-long cruise, and so he's doing his own tour of the Caribbean right now, and so he can't join us this weekend. But if I had to ask him, I'm sure that he would be saying that he's doing pretty swell. So with that being said, without further ado, we've got a lot on the plate for this show, and so this first part's probably going to be pretty snappy. So let's just get in it. How do you feel about that, Rob?
Good, ready to go.
All right, let's look at the weird, the inane, and the general happenings going on in the world by the crazy people who happen to live here. Let's hit it for news bits.
News bits. Show me your bits of news.
All right, what do you got this week, Rob?
Yeah, so in accordance with the stuff I've been doing for the Flip Challenge, I've been keeping a close eye on the tech market. So over the last couple of months, if you're following the stock market, the tech industry is taking some pretty big hits. And Apple is not Teflon when it comes to those losses. So a lot of reports have been coming out this week about Apple reducing production on all three of their new flagship devices, reducing production on MacBook Pros. MacBook sales were 25% less than they were a year ago. And they're also lowering the price of the iPhone XR in Japan due to it not selling as well in that region as they would have anticipated. So there's been a lot going on, and I think a lot of this is because there's a lot of competition in the marketplace. A lot of Chinese manufacturers have been stepping up their game. Companies like Huawei, Oppo, OnePlus, they've been doing a lot of work to really start killing off some of these flagship devices, and even Google is starting to feel this, and Samsung, and it's really interesting to see how the tech market is going, and that so much competition, especially from foreign companies, is really making an impact in the U.S. market right now, and it's really neat to see. I piloted a OnePlus 6T over the last week. Great device. It doesn't have iMessage, so I can't really use it. So
yeah, I noticed.
yeah, so it doesn't really work super well for me. But it's a great phone. If I didn't have everything in this Apple ecosystem, that would probably be my phone of choice because it just works really well. So they're doing a really nice job. And as I said on Monday's edition of RTM, if Android or a third-party company can figure out how to integrate iMessage into an Android atmosphere, then that would be a major issue for Apple.
I actually just listened to that episode of Rob Talks Money this morning, and I thought it was a great discussion. But the only problem with that is Apple's iMessage with its end-to-end encryption.
Yep.
And I'm not entirely sure that Apple would even make it. I mean, they've made it very hard to make that possible.
Right.
So I'm not sure that it is possible. I think you're right. If someone could crack that, that would be a big deal. But so my question related to this is, one of the things that's always been interesting to me about Apple and its reception in the market is there's all these tech bloggers out there that, like, honestly, regardless of what happens, the headline is pretty much Apple is doomed, and here's why. And so it's like, well, they didn't tell us how many iPhones they sold, and that's why they're doomed. Yeah. Or they told us how many iPhones they sold, and that's why they're doomed. Or their stock went down, or their stock went up, and that's why they're doomed. It's like they according to a lot of people in the tech world, they can't do anything right. So how does, in your opinion, what does that look like for this news? Is that, is there something there, or is it just kind of, Apple's going to do what Apple does?
I think short term it's going to impact Apple as far as production sales and contracts that they have with Samsung for OLED displays. And I think in the short term it's going to impact them a small bit, but in the long term it's going to educate them more on how they run phones. Like, for example, this is really the first year that they launched 3 flagship devices. And in just the iPhone XR alone, there were 18 different variants between color and size. So that's 18 different devices on one brand for the XR, and that's a new thing. So really, it's understanding public perception. I know a lot of tech bloggers were saying that the XR was going to be the best-selling phone of all time. So far, it hasn't had that yet, and it's a good device. I reviewed it when it first came out. I thought it was kind of trashy, but after having it for a little bit longer, and then now my wife has one, and now I have one, it's actually a pretty solid device. So that's kind of the first appearances aren't always how it shakes out. So I think short term it's going to be a little bit problematic as far as sales and earnings and stock price, but long term it's going to help them judge where the market is and also how to listen to their user base a little bit more on things like pricing and specifications for the phone and whatnot.
Yeah, interesting. Definitely something to keep in mind and keep watching. So great. So with that, my news bit is a little bit of tech, a little bit of social media news coming from, it's been all over the internet, but this article is from TheVerge.com. Twitter has banned misgendering or quote unquote dead naming transgender people. Says Twitter now prohibits misgendering or dead naming transgender people alongside other harassment and abuse tactics. And for the uninitiated, dead naming is when you continue to call someone by their given name and not by their chosen or their changed name, their changed transgender name.
That was a new term for me this week for sure. I never heard of that before.
I mean, new terms are popping up all over the place, but yeah. So this act has been banned by Twitter. it says the change appears to have happened in late October, but news of it began circulating last week. It's part of a more general rewording of the hateful conduct policy, which now emphasizes the fact that certain groups, including transgender people, are disproportionately targeted with abuse. What's interesting here is it says the hateful conduct policy previously banned repeated and or non-consensual slurs, epithets, racist and sexist tropes, or other content that degrades someone. The new policy specifies that this includes targeted misgendering or dead naming of transgender individuals, i.e. deliberately referring to transgender person with the wrong pronouns or using their pre-transition name. What really brought this into the light was it received public attention a few days after Twitter suspended radical feminist writer Megan Murphy, who had apparently violated its hateful conduct rules by repeatedly referring to a trans woman as a man and asking, what is the difference between a man and a trans woman? Twitter also recently suspended high-profile far-right personality Laura Lerner, and its hate speech policies are under particularly heavily scrutiny at the moment. So, it's very interesting. This is something the last bit about this radical feminist being banned is something that I've kind of had my eye on for a long time, because it seems that even, a lot of times we think of the LGBT movement as kind of a singular movement, but I have noticed a difference between how the different groups react to different people, and it's interesting because a lot of people call out the transgender ideology because it doesn't line up with the ideology of the rest of the movement, and so specifically in this case, you have a radical feminist. Generally a pro-LGBT person who is calling out them saying, basically if feminism has any weight, women have to be allowed to be women and men have to be allowed to be men. Like there has to be a distinction. So while some of these policies, hate speech policies, sometimes unfairly affect people on the right, this is not a right versus left issue. There are people across the spectrum that are getting hit specifically by this new change. And so we've talked about hate speech in the past, and it's got a very evolving definition and can basically mean whatever we want it to mean. One of the things that's interesting to me about this is they say intentional misgendering or intentional dead naming, and it's like, well, how do you know it's intentional? It seems like a subjective way of looking at it, and so it's definitely an interesting topic. What are your kind of initial thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with consistency of message. So there are a lot of people in that particular subsection, even in the LGBT community, who there's a lack of consistency in the message. So when so many people are throwing out so many ideas, especially ones that are so blatantly opposed to science, then when you have feminism and then you weigh it against the transgender community and naming and all of these different really all of these different names that you want to throw on when it comes to transgender naming and divisions and whatnot, that runs opposed to feminism. And that's where a lot of this conflict is coming from. A lot of these new terms are nullifying a lot of things that the LGBT community has been proponents of for so many years. So there's a lack of consistency in the message, which is sort of causing that particular group to eat itself in some ways.
Yeah, for sure. And like I alluded to earlier, there, even between the LGB and the T, there is, one of them, I think you hit the nail on the head as it relates to messaging. One of the main points of messaging as it relates to, gay and lesbian individuals is this idea that, we're born with it. It's genetics. We can't change this aspect of it. But then the transgender ideology comes along and says, well, genetics isn't everything. And, well, genetics can be wrong. Biology can be wrong. And what's more important is a mental state or emotional state. Yeah. And so, I think, like I said, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's a difference in messaging. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So there's a lot of threads that we could kind of unravel here. Social media censorship and hate speech policies, and the banning of the newest and latest, greatest, quote unquote, threat to free speech. And there's a lot of different threads, and then obviously LGBT and transgender ideology. There's a lot of different ways we could take this in. But for now, we will leave it at that, and we'd love to anyone who has any thoughts on that. We'd love to hear from you. As always, individuals, our listeners, can follow us on all social media platforms at Money Power Pod. They can join us in our Facebook group at moneypowerpod.com/group, and that will forward there. We've got a lot of great feedback today, and we will get into that in a little bit. But before we get into that, and before we get into our entrepreneur panel and introduced our distinguished guests, Rob, could you let us know who is bringing this podcast to air? Who is helping us put this whole show on?
So the company helping us keep the lights on at the Infinity Podcast Network, and more specifically Money and Power, is Hover.com. So Hover has been the sponsor of the show for a few weeks now, and I am a huge fan of Hover. I know you and I were both using them prior to them coming on board with the show, which was great for me because I like recommending things that I use. So Hover is basically a domain service. So they engage in domains, emails, transferring. It is a total solution, one price. A lot of times when you have different .com websites that give you domains, it'll be a fee for SSL, a fee for a private registrant, a fee so that it'll work. Hover is one fee for the entire package, and it's low cost. Like I talked about in RTM, it's been a big help for me getting my new company off the ground. So I highly recommend them, and they're giving listeners 10% off. They go to hover.com/moneyandpower. And that's 10% off all their services. So the emails, the transfers, the domains, it's a good rate. It's a good company, and I highly recommend them. So hover.com/moneyandpower for 10% off.
All right. So for this segment, we are going to delve right into the land of entrepreneurship and small business, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we brought on a couple of friends. So joining us today, we have our very own Rob Johnson. We've got a friend of the show, PJ Wenzel, and Justin Powell. And so what we're going to do is we're going to introduce them, ask them a couple questions individually, and then we're going to enter into kind of a round robin type panel discussion. And we're going to be bringing questions brought from your very own Money and Power hosts, as well as listeners of the show. So very exciting times. And we appreciate these gentlemen for joining us in. First of all, coming from his hometown in Darke County, Ohio, Justin Powell is an entrepreneur and businessman, serving as founder and CEO of Huntington Outdoor, the Midwest's fastest growing outdoor advertising company. Justin successfully built and sold 2 other advertising businesses and is actively involved in several nonprofits. So welcome to the show, Justin.
It is a pleasure to be on, Jeremiah. Super excited to talk to you all tonight about entrepreneurship and kind of getting into some questions and sharing a little bit about advertising and my company. So I'm excited.
Awesome. So my question for you as we begin is kind of start from the beginning. How did you get started? What prompted you to start your own business? Have you always had kind of a flair for the entrepreneurship, or is it something that came on later? How did you get started?
When I was 16 years old, or no, excuse me, younger than that. I was probably 12 years old. I was out. I grew up on a farm. Farms lend themselves to entrepreneurial endeavors. Really, really enjoyed growing things. And I convinced my dad. I was like, Dad, we grew a quarter acre of produce this last year. Why don't we up that to an acre of sweet corn and that kind of thing, and let's go try to sell it at farm markets. And someone told me at the farm market when we were, it was just a local town, back out of the back of the pickup truck. Someone told me, they're like, Justin, you're quite the entrepreneur. I was 12 years old, and that stuck with me at 12 years old. And I literally could not say the word entrepreneur until I was about 16 to 18, but I just would tell everybody I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Didn't really know what it meant, but I knew that I wanted to create and build things, build companies. I knew I wanted to sell. So that's kind of that's kind of how it all started. One thing led to another. I ended up running the produce company, growing it. We had 6 locations, and by the time I graduated college at 20, I was looking around going, there's not a lot of people in the produce farm market business that's bigger than I am. And they're all about 50 years old and they're working just as hard as I am. And I'm like, I don't want that. I don't want that. And so, so I started to look at some other opportunities and really started to try to figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Well, very good. Is there anything that I left out, or anything else that you want our listeners to know about you before we get into the panel discussion?
Let's see. I live in my hometown. I never left. I think that's important. I think that's important for people. I think a lot of people want to go change the world, and they get in their cars and drive. And a lot of times there's so much need in the communities that they live in, and they know these communities best. So I live in my hometown. I grow my companies here. I'm actually standing in my offices in beautiful downtown Greenville, which is in Darke County, and I love it here. It's wonderful, and I think that's important.
That's awesome. Very good. Very good. Well, we definitely appreciate you joining the show, Justin. We'll get back to you for more questions here in a second. But second of all, I want to introduce PJ Wenzel, a founding partner at Ring. He is an entrepreneur and political consultant. He has worked in political and issue campaigns since 1994 in over 45 states, internationally on 3 continents. PJ has built and sold a multi-million-dollar business, has a master's in political management from George Washington University, and is working, albeit slowly, on his master's in theology from Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's worked at the White House, in Congress, and on 4 presidential campaigns at all levels. He has advised and been promptly ignored, I like that part, by dozens of members of Congress and Canadian Parliament, and admires Winston Churchill as the greatest statesman of the 20th century. He lives in Dublin, Ohio, with his wife, Katie, and their 4 rambunctious kids. Welcome to the show, PJ.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it. Really enjoy the opportunity to talk to you guys today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will pass on the same question to you. How did you get started with, what prompted you to start your own business? Is it something, has entrepreneurship always been a thing in your past, or how did that all start?
Yeah, I guess there's something about political campaigns that sort of lend themselves to entrepreneurial activities and endeavors. I mean, mainly because you're always broke all the time, so you really have nothing to lose. And so from an early age, I like to say on that bio that you read that I started doing campaigns. So it was like 1994. I was 12. And so, from very, very early age, I was involved in that kind of thing. And then later on, I really wanted to go out on my own. I really wanted to, scrape together clients and things like that. Once I run some campaigns, and I got some really good sage sort of advice from a guy that was a mentor of mine, and he said, no, you really need to learn to manage a budget. You really need to learn to like manage people, and before you go and like run a business, and before you kind of go out on your own. So he said you need to manage like a top tier congressional campaign where you've got like total control over everything, and you have to work with the money and the in and the out and all that stuff, right? So I thought, oh man, I really don't want to do that, but I did it anyway, and it was really, really good for me. And as soon as I got done with that, a buddy of mine said, hey, I was doing some work last cycle, and I saved some money aside. And I know you don't have a job right now, but I got 60 grand, and we could make a run of it. And like you and me and maybe one other guy we could try to like start our own thing. And so we tried. And it was hilarious. Like the first year, it was crazy, and we can get into that, some more of that later or whatever. But like from that point on, just making your own destiny, that always sort of appealed to me. Going out and scratching a living and kind of doing something like that was your own and making it and building it from thing, and I got excited about that. So yeah, that was like 2009, and from then on, it's like, yeah. I've just never looked back. So
awesome. And your businesses do a little bit of everything, voter contact, digital strategies, marketing, advertising, just a little bit of everything. Huh?
Yeah. I have two businesses now. Like the one I had with my buddy, we sold that. And then I started a family business. And my dad is my business partner. And he's a pollster. He does, market research and political campaign research and stuff like that. And, I thought, well, I'll do that, hang out while my non-compete runs out from the sale of the business. And so we did that. We still have that business. He loves that. He's really like, he's a research guy. Like he's an artist. He's a scientist. He loves that stuff. But I like bringing in the clients and writing the business plan. I mean, my vacation over the winter break was literally writing the business plan for 2019. Like that was like, yeah, that's why I dig my that's what I really love. So yeah, I mean, we do a little bit of everything, but we have two different businesses. My main business, the biggest of the two, is a digital marketing agency, and we started doing like telecom stuff, and we still do. I mean, several $1 million a year of telecom stuff. So we do like, these large telephone town hall conference calls. We still do like live call center, live texting, automated reminders, stuff like that. But the digital is like, it's political, it's commercial, it's really advanced. And that's kind of like where our future is, and, what we enjoy the most, I think.
All right. Very good. Is there any last, any other things that you'd want our listeners to know about you personally, family-wise? Any likes or dislikes? Or
likes and dislikes? Man, I don't know. I'm a total dork. I'll tell you that much. I love to read. I love like, classics. I love Dickens. I love Jane Austen. I love theology. I fell asleep last night reading Calvin's Institutes. And I've got like Milton and Dante by my bed. I'm just like a total dork. So, I mean, that's probably something you should know.
well, very good. So, appreciate you joining the show, PJ. So last and definitely least is my co-host, Rob Johnson. He is a financial consultant and podcast host. If you didn't already know, he's originally from Flint, Michigan. He holds an MBA in organizational development and has performed peer-reviewed on-site research surrounding organizational development and employee wellness. Rob is also the founder of RTM Solutions, the Wayne Consulting Group, and the co-founder of the Infinity Podcast Network, where he hosts two shows, Apologetics 105 and Rob Talks Money, as well as occasionally co-hosting the Money and Power podcast. His primary focus in business is helping people and businesses make good good decisions with their money so they can lower stress and increase their productivity. Rob is married to his wife, Beth, and they have 2 children together. So welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks. First time caller, long time listener.
Oh, very good. So I'll pass it to you. What prompted you to start your own business, to go in the direction that you ended up going in?
So I never had that entrepreneurial bug when I was younger. I wanted to be a doctor first and foremost, and so I started that path when I was 18, and ended up getting kicked out of school, and life was kind of spinning a bit. And it really wasn't until I had decided to go and finish my BBA that I had this idea to start a company. And as I was transitioning from my BBA to my MBA, one area that I've always liked was economics and finance, and I really wanted to help people just do better with money overall. I had a tremendous amount of debt, and the program that I was using wasn't overly helpful. So my wife and I kind of sat down and said, this worked, this didn't work. And then I took about 6 months and wrote what is now the 9 Moves plan that kind of runs RTM. And that was really the first glimpse of like, well, maybe I can do this thing full time, and maybe I can do this long term. So now we kind of have an exit strategy to build RTM and the Wayne Consulting Group, which is a new company that I'm starting with a good friend of mine, and kind of build those 2 companies together, and then both of us be off on our own full time in those companies come 2020. So that's the game plan. But yeah, it wasn't always start to be an entrepreneur and to do something on my own. I really just wanted to be a CFO or but things definitely changed when I saw how bad the financial wellness market was, and how terrible the products were that existed. So
well, very good. I would ask if there's something that we should know about you, but we know you really like the TV show MASH. We get it, Rob. We get it.
Big fan.
So our longtime listeners, and by that I mean anyone who has listened to more than one episode, knows his affinity for the show MASH. But anyway, moving on, there is a reason that we brought these individuals together, and I hope that you can start to see that just in their intros and what they bring to the table. These 3 individuals are kind of an array of different businesses, different backgrounds, and so we've got financial, we've got political, we've got marketing, bringing it together. We've got Justin, who basically since he was a toddler has been an entrepreneur, and before he could even pronounce entrepreneur. And we've got Rob, who came about it later in life. And we also have different sizes of companies. We've got different different stages of the game. So with that, I hope that we'll bring a lot of value as we get into these questions. So first, let's start off with this. One of the things that maybe isn't necessarily foundational when we start businesses, I don't necessarily think that this is this isn't always a question that we ask ourselves, but maybe it's something that we ask, later on in the game. But for each of you, how do you measure success as it relates to being a business owner, as it relates to being an entrepreneur? And, when, if ever, did you, finally come to realize that your business was a success? Justin?
Man.
Good question. Very, very good question. Let's see. Okay, so probably has to go back to when I started the company. One of the things I learned when I was running the produce business was I was kind of in a business where if I did not work, I didn't earn any money. It was kind of a glorified job, and I was like, I don't want that. And so in starting this, what turned into my current company, which is Huntington Outdoor, we do billboards. I had a couple criteria. I wanted to be able to support a family. I wanted to be able to leave for weeks, months on end, and still have a company when I came back. And I wanted to have assets that were income producing that would be saleable, right? If I walked away from the company, someone else bought it, they could run it just as well or better than I did. And so as the company has formed and grown, and as I have continued to travel more, success looks like coming back and things not being in complete disarray. So that's what I would say success looks like for me.
Awesome. And just for the record, anyone can jump in at any time. I want this to be, a conversation, and feel free to, take issue with someone, with what someone says, or, feel free.
Well, then, I want to take issue with you, Jeremiah. I want to know why PJ is a friend of the podcast, and I'm just.
Yeah. What about that? I noticed that too.
Well,
I'm just like a stranger to the podcast, or what?
Well, there are obvious reasons for that. So go ahead, PJ. What's your answer?
Well, I mean, what I think success looks like is, basically being invited to a podcast and being labeled as a friend of the podcast. I mean, I've already arrived. I mean, right. Justin can go away at weeks on end and then arrive and his business is intact. But, when he goes on a podcast, I mean, he's basically a nobody. So, I mean, I would say Justin got a long road to hope, my friend. Got a long road to hope. But, I mean, Jeremiah, to answer your question, I mean, my thoughts are, like, immediately I thought back to, like, after my first year in business, it was, like, 2009. And at that point, there was 4 of us. We were doing a little bit of everything. We were calling ourselves like sort of general consultants. And basically that just means we'll do anything to make a buck. And in the campaign world, which means like, we're writing campaign plans and we're kind of like guiding these candidates toward victory or loss, depending on how bad we were or they were. And we were like sort of bringing in subcontractors to do everything else. And, I think we all sort of like barely paid our bills that year. I think we did about $650,000 in gross receipts, and then, so we did okay, but none of us, I mean, we hadn't paid back like the initial like investment. We were, we were like barely making it. And, I think that's when we had read Jim Collins' Good to Great. And, we were like, if we could just do like one of these things right, then it might really help our business a lot. And one of the things that we thought of that really stuck with us, that helped us, was, putting the right people in the right seats on the bus. Is what Jim Collins talks about, right? Yeah. And at the time, like I was doing a lot of the execution operationally of the work because I was like into the technology, right? I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I had gone and like found this stuff, and so I was like into that. And this young kid, Brian, who I was like mentoring, and he was like, working with us, he was doing all the prospecting because that was like, we saw that as like the grunt work, right? The labor. But he sucked at prospecting. And like, I love Brian. He's a great guy, but like, he had 0 contacts, right? So he was just basically like cold calling the whole time. So like Matt and I were like, Matt's my business partner at the time. We're like, man, what if we don't have the right people in the right seats? I was like, well, what do you suggest? He's like, well, why don't you just call through your Rolodex and like maybe get some of your old business contacts. Maybe you try to do some selling over the next, like, let's just give it 2 weeks, right? Well, in 2 weeks, I think I brought in $150,000-$200,000, which was a third of our, total grosses for the whole year before. And so I was like, maybe there's something to this, right? So we switched seats on the bus. Brian like learned how to do everything operationally. And we did $2.4 million next year. And like sometime I can literally pinpoint the moment. It was June of 2010. And we had already done like twice as much as we had the year before. And we had just landed 2 contracts that like it was like a Thursday. I literally remember it. And I remember saying like, we made it. Like we this is happening. Like we're actually successful. Like we can do this. Like, we're not going to starve. We can actually pay our mortgage. This is great. So that was like kind of that moment for me where I was like, okay, we took an idea, we implemented it, we worked our ass off, for 6 months, and then like, look what happened. We're not starving anymore. Like, we can actually go out to eat if we want, actually. So, that was that moment.
That's awesome. Yeah, and for the record, I thought that was a great answer. And you know what? You didn't give me any lip either, so that's why you're a friend of the show.
That's right.
Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah. So for me, my business models, my business plans are very much unproven yet. So I haven't had the chance to look and say, this is successful by other people's standards. So far it's off to a good start, and that's, cash flow positive, no debt. Those are obviously good things in a company, but I haven't hit the level yet where I feel that it's safe to fully transition. So that's really going to be my measure of success, is when me and the other guy that's running things can both say, you know what, it's time, and we have enough annual renewals that we can run, and we have a good enough client services area that we can jump ship. So that hasn't hit yet, and it's a timing thing, it's a patience thing. So once that occurs, I know what it looks like. And we're not waiting around to see it. We're actually going out and finding it. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking.
That's awesome. So one thing that I've noticed, I think over the past couple years, is that there's somewhat of a cultural shift that we're seeing this glorification of not just entrepreneurship, but the idea of entrepreneurship. And I wanted to kind of get your guys' take on that. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What in your mind, what does that look like?
You mean like that this is something that, it's the entrepreneurship is sort of held out as like a sort of gold standard. Like, this is like, is that what you mean? Yeah,
absolutely. And you got people that, everyone's Instagram bio says, I'm an entrepreneur, just because, they partake in, multi-level marketing or something like
God.
that. And it's just
right.
So everyone's an entrepreneur. Everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And that's like the goal for everyone, regardless of kind of a self-awareness of, whether they're made for that type of thing or whether it's, even something that they want to do. Just it's kind of glorified, I think, more than it has been in the past.
Yeah. So I think that, like, I'm just going to speak to maybe a deeper level on that. Like, I really believe that, we were made for work. I mean, I believe we were made for like real meaningful work. And I think that a lot of times people get into sort of their career or, maybe the corporate arena, and they feel really super stifled. And, it's just not satisfying. They probably have like the wrong outlook on that. Or maybe they're just in the wrong place. But I don't necessarily think that entrepreneurial endeavors are for everybody. And I think I think that there's a lot of factors there. And so they think, man, I could work from home. I can be in my sweatpants. I can earn $3,000 a day, like that guy, Zimbabwe, who just sent me that email. He says $3,000 a day, like, and he can show me how.
When the Prince of Nigeria asks you for money, you're not going to say no.
Hey, you know what? It's a good deal. You send him $1,000, he sends you $60,000. That's a hell of an ROI. That's all I'm saying.
Oh my god. I mean, maybe you guys don't agree with me. I'm just saying, like, I think that it's just one of those things where it isn't for everybody. Like, it takes tremendous risk, and really got to be on the same page with your spouse, and you gotta be like totally single-minded and ready to kind of like, understand like humbly when like maybe something's not working out and you have to go another direction too.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that it's easy. that kind of like you said, I can sit at home, sweatpants, kind of have a home office, and then post on my Instagram all these pictures of Ferraris and stacks of cash, and people can really think that I made it. But there's, like you said, there's a lot of risk. There is, I know for me, like when a new company starts or when you're going through a transition period, there's a lot of stress, and there's just it's a lot of effort. I have people, from the other show saying, "Hey, I have this great idea. Can you help me?" And whenever I ask them, "Well, how much time have you put into this?" They say, "Well, I just thought about it." It's like, well, bro, don't come at me with an idea that you put 45 minutes of work into. Like you have to sit down and think things through and think about every aspect. And that's why I'm a proponent of business plans. So I can actually see your idea and where you're going. But it's like you said, it's a lot of work, and it's a great field to be into, to be in the business of working for yourself, but only if you're that type of person that can sustain that type of lifestyle. Some people are made to be employees, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think one of the reasons why entrepreneurship is so just it's everywhere right now is when I was just getting started in business in my current company. I had just graduated from college, and it was like 2009, 2010. It was not a great time to get a job anywhere. Like the kind of this like social contract that had existed between employees and employer, just kind of like the last vestiges of that just broke down. And I think my generation, millennials, looked at their parents and saw a lot of them losing their jobs. They'd poured 20, 30, 40 years into these companies, and these companies were going, "See you later." And they're like, I don't want that. And so it's out of necessity on some of our parts, we kind of jumped into the entrepreneurial world. I, for one, was going to go get a job. In fact, my dad, I was 20 years old. I'd graduated from college. I'd lived in DC. I'd come back to, rural Ohio. There wasn't a lot of jobs. And I was basically trying to find some kind of job anywhere. Probably one of the most humbling days of my life was I went in for a teller, teller job at a bank. And I got my suit on, I went into this interview. It was kind of the bottom, and there's nothing wrong with being a teller at all. It didn't, I had a degree. It didn't require a degree. And the lady across my interviewer goes, "Justin, I'm going to be honest with you. We have bankers who have 20 years of experience trying to get this teller job." Probably one of the most humbling moments. And but also one of the best moments, because I was able to come back and look at my family. And at that point, I didn't have a wife, didn't have kids, still don't. However, I was able to go. I don't have to get a job immediately. I'm going to start my own business, right? So out of necessity, Huntington was born. And I think there's a lot of our generation who are like that, who are like, yeah, I can't find a job. I'm gonna hustle. I'm gonna try something. So I think that's why you're seeing more and more of it. More and more people just kind of get into the gig economy and starting their own companies.
No, I think that's great. There's a quote, and I don't have the proper source for it, but someone said entrepreneurs are willing to work an 80-hour work week to avoid a 40-hour work week.
I always tell people you have complete freedom. You can work anytime you want, any 20 out of 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And people often say this in the opposite direction. They'll say entrepreneurs can make their own hours, but if you have a mentality that is, I can, work 2 hours from my couch and, that's my entire day. Well, that's probably not the experience of most entrepreneurs. But, that being said, when you've got a growing business, when you're in charge and, everyone relies on you, and, you've just got to put in the work, put in the hustle to make it happen. Where is the place for work-life balance in that? Is there even such a thing as work-life balance? How does that play out for you guys?
I mean, I think so. I think that there's, I think there's definitely a need for balance. I think, it's good to also have community too, because sometimes like it takes community to tell you like that you're out of balance, because you you'll lie to yourself. But yeah, man, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever read that book, What's Best Next by Matt Perman.
Great book. Great book.
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal
Have
book.
you read that, Justin? Man,
yeah,
that's phenomenal, isn't it?
It's phenomenal. That's a great book.
Yeah. And it is, it's like, one of the things that he says, he just talks about it. I mean, so many people do, about being a Nazi with your time and stuff like that. And I found that the more stringent I am with my work time, and just basically, not being distracted by social media, not being distracted by the news stuff. Like I just kind of, just do things like the same. I get the same rhythms. Like, I read the news from probably the same point of time in the morning. I get all the podcasts and the news done like before I try to launch into anything, and I just ignore a lot of the other crap that comes through, because if I don't spend like very devoted time, so like I really believe that Perman talks about, like, there really is no such thing as multitasking.
Yeah,
and so
that's
like that is a complete myth, right? So when I do not multitask and I really focus on like the things I have to do to get done, I'm able to get a lot of my work done. I know we were kind of joking just now about like 20-hour work days, stuff like that. But the truth is, it's like, once you get to a point in your business where like it's humming and rolling, I mean, I work a lot of odd hours, but I feel like I also have a lot of time, like to spend with my family, to go like, I mean, for instance, it just looks different. Today is like a perfect example. I'll just say, like, I spent the first hour and a half reading news articles and listening to podcasts and catching up on everything before I did like my check-in calls. I had like 3 conference calls, and like they're at different points in the day, but like I was able to still block out 2.5 hours in the middle of the day to do like a theological pulpit team meeting with all the elders to prepare for Sunday morning. And where I could just basically block everyone else out and say like, no, I got this. And I could just do one thing at a time really, really well. And then, and then we're doing this here, and it's late into the evening, we're doing this. But like, I just spent the last 3 hours of the evening watching like a Christmas movie with my kids and spending like some quality time with my wife. And, but I was working right up until about, 6:30, 7. So like, I think it's just that the hours look a little different, but the more you're okay with that psychologically, and like, the balance may not look like a 9 to 5er where it's like, yeah, my evenings are with my family. Well, sometimes the middle of the day is with my family. I mean, sometimes like that's just the way it is. Right. I mean, So that's, for me, it's like, you just have to think about it different. And the more you're a Nazi with your time, I keep using that word. It's probably not a good word to use, but like, but I'm saying, like, the more you're like really, really straight and focus on like, this hour is when I do all the email I could possibly do. This is when I'm going to do my business planning. This is when I'm going to like do my prospect emails and stuff like that. I mean, people underestimate, like, I mean, you can flip and, I can get so much email and phone calls done in 1 hour. I mean, I can make so much money in 1 hour that it's absolutely off the hook ridiculous. But I have to focus. I have to turn off everything else, right? And that's the discipline that I think it takes to really succeed as an entrepreneur. And that discipline is what allows balance. That's my opinion.
And I would say the one thing I'd add to that, and this is something I whenever anybody comes to me with, Justin, I got this idea for a new business, I kind of always look at them and go, all right, what do you want your future life to look like? Because there are certain businesses that don't lend themselves to work-life balance. They just don't. If you own a restaurant, for the most part, you are going to be there a massive amount of time. And with any business too, there's certain seasons of life that you can start businesses in better than others. And so, you really need to look at people people completely underestimate how much time it's going to take on the front end to start a company. And then they a lot of times don't have a lot of discipline with the companies that they start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even like within, I mean, Justin, I don't know if you found this to be true, and Rob, I don't know, like in your fields, but one of the things that I learned about, like, for instance, in politics, like, was that the consulting is so much fun. It's like so much fun. It's like you get, I mean, I'm telling these U.S. senators and these congressmen, like, I'm like, you should say this, you should do that, and it's just great. Like, it's so great. But like, I also learned really quickly, like, I'm taking calls at 11:30, at 12:30 in the evening, and it's like stupid stuff. And I realized, like, that is not a way. Just like you said, like, okay, that's not sustainable, right? So I have to figure out, how do I do the industry that I love, but do it, like, what do I do in this industry that I love, but I gotta have some, like, way to, like, have a lifestyle,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big thing. And for me, like, one thing that I try to stick to is, like, if you're not doing any type of work-life balance, then you're doing something demonstrably wrong. Because if you have a wife and children specifically, and all your time is found at work, and you have no balance, then there's something there that needs to be moved around. And I'm not talking about, like, desperation, like, hey, we need to eat, so I need to work 80 hours. That's completely different. But if you have things running reasonably well, but you still find yourself never at home, then something needs to change. Because the last thing I want anybody to do is, work their ass off for 20 years and then look up and their kids are gone. And they have all this quote-unquote success, but their kids hate them,
Yeah, that's crazy. Justin, can you know what I'm talking about with that? You know what Rob's talking about there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tons of kids. Now listen. This is what I tell people. I say, I might not have a bunch of my own kids, but I got this nonprofit where there's like 40 college students.
That's true.
That we help. And so I tell them, whenever we speak to them, I always say, when I started doing Forge, is the name of the nonprofit for those who don't know. When I started doing Forge, I used to have very little gray. Now I'm just about white. So.
This is all you. And so for the people who, and so, like, for the people who are not friends of the podcast, like, I've known Justin for a couple of years, so I can make fun of him.
And not only that, but PJ and I have this little bet going to see who can read the most books this year.
It's just totally ridiculous.
PJ's goal was like 150, and so, like, I said like 200 just to top him. I think I'm at like 10.
Here's the real story. Here's what really happened. Like, I set the goal at 200, and then I look on Goodreads, and Goodreads, like Goodreads.com, you go to it, and I see that Justin Powell has set his goal to 201. And I'm like, what? And then I text a friend of Justin's, a trustworthy source, and I say, what is going on? And he says, Justin's key to success is that he has learned that there are 200 Bernstein Bear books, and that he can get them from the library. And I was like, oh man.
It's going to happen, and I've got all of December to catch up before the end of the year.
There's still time. There's still time.
There's still time.
I had my money at Bernstein Bears. That works too.
There you go.
All right, so we've got a couple questions from some of our podcast listeners. We asked. We said we were having this panel. We talked about it in our discussion group, and listeners can find that at moneypowerpod.com/group. And in the discussion group, some of our listeners posed some questions, so I want to make sure we get to those as well. So a longtime listener of the show, Tony Vance, says, how much should a business care about their responsibility to their community?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's a huge deal. I mean, that goes beyond, like, I think that goes beyond just, like, a responsible business person. I mean, I think that's, like, just to be a human being, you should be, like, caring about your community and giving back and things like that, just to live a fulfilled life and to, really just pour into the people around you. And I mean, I know that looks different for different people, but I mean, that's it goes back to the balance thing. I mean, but you know, I think that's a huge deal.
I'm gonna give an unpopular opinion just because PJ gave like the nice like Christian. So I would say the first role of a business is to make money ethically. Meaning you go go out and you offer a good service or product at a fair price, and you do it ethically. And I would say that is a good in and of itself for your community. And the reason I say that is because I have a lot of people who come to me and go, Justin, I've got this idea and we're going to sell this product and we're going to give away half of our profits to XYZ nonprofit or for whatever. And I'm always like, I get it. I understand. If that's a marketing ploy, that's one thing. That's great. However, like if that helps you sell more and make money, do it. If it doesn't, then like just take your profits and go give it to the people yourself,
right?
Because it's going to be hard enough to make a profit already without you committing 50% of your profits, right? So I don't know. I see that all the time, and I'm just going. It's going to be hard. So like keep your profits, reinvest, hire people in your community, pay good wages, offer good service or product. So I don't know. It matters, but you need to make money.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Business is doing nobody any favors by doubling down on, profitable donations within the community. Meanwhile, their employees are suffering or paid minimum wage or whatever, or paid under market. I agree 100%. Businesses ought to have a structure in place where they can pay their employees well, keep the lights on, keep profits rolling in, and then as they scale up, do more in the community. But just doing that alone, just hiring people in the community and providing, as you said, a value to the community, that is a lot. And I think that's something that people miss when they're looking at a business's impact in the community. They kind of look at, well, what charitable efforts are you doing in addition to you running a business that's hiring people in the community and paying taxes and doing all of this? So they say like that's not good enough. What more are you doing? So it's important to look at it in its full context for sure.
Little shout out for Darke County. If anybody out there who hears this podcast wants to come and just bring high-paying jobs to Darke County, we don't care if you give $1 of your money away. Just come bring high-paying jobs. Literally our average salary in this county is about $30,000.
Wow.
And what that salary level does for communities is very hard on them. There's not the disposable income for entertainment and restaurants and that kind of stuff just isn't there. Yeah. And so it makes other businesses hard to run in the community. So anyway, we'll take all high paying jobs. Anything over $30,000 would be great.
Yeah. So. Well, I think I think that, listen, there's two levels to this question, right? I mean, I guess I answered like the more human individual level, right? I was talking about
deep, you're reading your.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that the reason why this is such a big thing, the reason why it's so popular is because Fortune 500 companies and big companies are being asked to give back and to care about their community and blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's good for them to do so. And it's good that they're doing what they're doing. But I think it's also because people see that, there's potentially a higher visibility downside to them being in the community as well. Like that there's other stuff that they have going on there. People are like, they don't see everything that Justin's doing to mess up Darke County, or otherwise they'd be making him contribute back to.
No, seriously though, the whole Giving Tuesday today, the Giving Tuesday was today, Facebook giving away matching up to $7 million or whatever. Did anybody else see that just as a shameless plug to hey guys, don't worry about our data breaches and unethical behavior. Here's $7 million.
Right.
Well, what the way that I took that is they get a cut of all of the donations that are made on their platform, and so they made that back like tenfold probably. Yeah. And not only that, but I was watching it, and very quickly, like this morning, it said we are going to match. To it changed to we matched, and so they hit that number before like 11 a.m. this morning, and then the rest of the day. So then I think last year's numbers was like $47 million was given on the Facebook platform. And so even if they hit that, like that's such a small, like that's going to be a drop in the bucket of what they ultimately made. So that's the way I took it. But yeah, it's fun stuff. So a couple other listener questions. Listener Sean says, do you think it is better to be first to market with a product or service, or wait to see what can be improved upon?
That's a good question. It depends. So the company that I work for is an annuity company, and they have the reason why they've been so successful in the market is because they've waited. Now, that's not always the best strategy, but they very much have this concept of eating your own dog food. So they very much test out their own products in-house. They make sure everything works. They look at that. They're not overly concerned with being first to market. But now that they have their model in place and they have their efficiencies set up whenever they release a new financial product, now they are first to market. So they've kind of built all these internal efficiencies by being second or third to market, made them the best that they could be. And now that it's, now the company's been around for 50 years, but about 30 years into the company, it really started to scale. And they went from being, second, third, fourth, fifth. We don't really care when we're in market because our products are going to be the best long term, to now being best products long term and first to market, which is an interesting strategy. So I don't think there's a one size fits all for every company. It really just depends on what you're doing and what impact it's going to have on the end user or the consumer.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I was thinking about that. So I don't know the answer to the question because I feel like in the current situation that I'm in, like we have a digital product, like a buying product for digital advertising that is like completely different than everybody that we're pitching has ever seen. And I feel like it's really, really, really hard to be first to market. Like unless there's like this great demand for it or unless like you just catch lightning in a bottle or something, like, because I can tell you that plowing ahead and being the vanguard is not easy. It takes a lot of meetings. It takes a lot of like, it's just it for me, like for this one particular digital piece that we're doing, like it's been a year and a half of just drudgery. And I have no doubt like a lot of people are very interested, like a lot of big companies, a couple Fortune 50s, like we're making progress on, but it's like we're on our 9th meeting. It's like it's horrible. And so like I think that unless you are already in that space and you are an established like name or entity, like let me give you an example. The exact opposite happened. So like, and that's the commercial space. In the political space, like that same digital product, because we were an unknown entity, like in another way, all I had to do is say, I've got this new thing that's going to really help. And everyone like scooped it up. It was crazy. But like when you're not an established or known entity in like that market, in that vertical, then being first, so to speak, can really suck. It can be really, really hard.
Yeah.
All right, very good. So one last question from a listener, and then I'm going to do a rapid fire, and it's going to be just top of the dome. Whatever comes to mind, that's going to be your answer, and we're gonna blast through a bunch more questions before we close it out. But before we do that, one last question from listener Khalid: what is the best way to establish business credit?
Oh gosh. So I'll do this one. I'll start this one. So we my company is very asset heavy, so we build we billboards, and we build hundreds of them a year. Business credit is incredibly hard to get. I started during the recession, and so it was impossible to get. You just couldn't get it. Fortunately, I had a little bit of savings from the produce company. I was able to build my first set of billboards, show a little bit of a track record. And I think that's probably, it depends on the type of business you're in, whether there's any kind of bankable assets that you're going to be owning. And so if you own a digital political consulting company and you're just starting out, my guess is there's not a lot of bankable assets there.
It's really tough.
Yeah.
It's like literally you have to the bank or my business banker had to go to those guys, the upper level, and sell them on me. He was calling me. He's like, so what's the best way for me to pitch them? I'm like, we've already gone over this 3 times. I know. I just want. I'm like, oh God, help me. I'm just So yeah, it is hard.
I had to. So I kind of had to basically pony up my own money. Some siblings had some money to at least show a track record. And even then it took 3 or 4 years. However, I think it is loosening a little bit, credit's loosening a little bit with that. It's just, and it all depends on what business you're into. I mean, there's, you go into commercial real estate or something like that, those assets are just so much more bankable, meaning that, there's an asset there that has intrinsic value, that has a liquid market. So, if the bank, the bank's always looking at what the bank's looking at is, if things go south, how likely am I to get my money back? How can I sell what they have or whatever else to get it? And so, it took me years. And actually 2 weeks ago was the first time I ever had a banker. I had a banker call me and say, "Do you need money?" I was like, "Wow, this is the best day ever." I said no. It was a wonderful feeling. But we're 8-9 years in business now, and so yeah, first time.
Yeah, I literally had the same kind of a similar experience where about 2 months ago or so, 2 or 3 months ago, the bank, someone at one of our branches said they just called. They're like, "We're just looking at your statements here and the amount of money that's flowing through your account." And we're like, "Can we just sit down and have a meeting?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." And I was thinking to myself, what do they want? What have I done wrong? And they're like,
they found my laundering business.
I'm like, what have I done? I'm like, surely, they're gonna do something. This is gonna be a bad meeting. But it was the same thing. It was they just look at the track record. Someone got curious, right? And they saw this, and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" So they started looking through. They're like, "Can we?" And they literally said, "Can we give you a line of credit, a 6-figure line of credit?" I was like, "Yeah, I guess." Well, I mean, I don't need it. And they're like, "But it might be a good idea." I was thinking I could either leave right now and go and do the rest of my work, or I could sit here and enjoy this guy's Diet Coke and have the banker sell me on himself. I'm like, I'm just gonna stay here.
PJ has officially made it.
Right.
Friend of the podcast and Banker's Friends.
Banker's Friends.
It's a good combo.
Oh my god,
it's a good combo.
Any last thoughts on that, Rob?
No, I think that's good. I think, as far as the basics, you obviously need to have a company formed. You need to have an EIN, so just some real basics. And then you need to have a good track record. You need to have assets are nice, and then having consistent cash flow in and out of the company is a big thing that banks look at. So I've the credit union that I work with has been super helpful and kind of showing me what their expectations are and what their levels are. And every bank and credit union is different. Everyone has different standards, so it's always good to know if looking at an LOC or just a bulk loan is something that you're looking at, then understand what their qualifications are, and then start working towards that. But it's very difficult to do, especially starting out. Even most places don't count anything until you've been at least 3 years in business. It's been my experience. So.
All right, very good. So, gentlemen, we are entering the lightning round. I'm going to pepper you with questions, rapid fire. Each of you must respond. There are no passes. There are no phone a friends, even if you are a friend of the podcast. So
I have no friends.
With Thanksgiving behind us and Christmas coming up very quickly, first question, favorite kind of pie?
Pumpkin pie.
Sugar cream.
Pumpkin.
All right, very good. Turkey stuffing or dressing?
What is dressing exactly?
I think it's like external stuffing.
See, I caught you, Justin. We talked about this last week. You did not listen. Don't tell me that you're a listener.
That's why you're not a friend of the show, bro.
Boom.
Isn't dressing like Southern stuffing? Isn't that what they call it?
So I asked the exact same question last week. So stuffing is when it's actually stuffed inside the turkey. Dressing is just the side and has nothing to do with the turkey. But the contents are pretty much exactly the same. So we determined that it's just the proximity to the turkey.
Do I have to? Can we just say neither? Like, is that a thing? Like, okay,
go ahead, for sure.
I'm gonna say neither because it's just like, isn't it just like bread and like celery and stuff? So why do they put this in a turkey?
Dude, no wonder you're not a friend of the podcast. I mean, that's the best part.
That response sounds like he's a friend of no one if he doesn't like dressing. Like, what is going on?
Wow. This guy's pressing fast.
He never had a Thanksgiving growing up, so guys, just leave him alone. All right. When is it appropriate to play Christmas music / decorate for Christmas?
Post Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I gotta go with now I would listen to Christmas music without telling anybody 2 weeks before, but I'd save my decorating till after Thanksgiving.
I kind of do it in it's like there's certain Christmas songs that are like okay before, and then right as you get up to Thanksgiving, it's like, all right, the full-fledged pre-Thanksgiving Christmas list, post-Thanksgiving Christmas list, and then the trees go up right after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, there's some stuff that you can tolerate after Thanksgiving, like you can't tolerate John Lennon singing Christmas carols until after Thanksgiving.
Yes,
it's just
Elvis.
Good Lord. Or Elvis, right? Singing about the ghetto and stuff. It's like, okay, before Thanksgiving, I can tolerate some hymns, like that. I can, something more classic, that's fine. But we get into that kind of nonsense. It's like when the Eagles come on and they're singing something, and you're like, wait.
Peace and love on earth after Thanksgiving. That's what I
after Thanksgiving. Totally.
Right. So what I hear you all saying is you're all a bunch of Scrooges. Got it. Moving on. Very important question. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Ha. All right. 3-1. Boom. All right. Is it is it pronounced GIF or GIF?
GIF.
GIF.
I knew I liked you.
I just found out what they were last year, and I'm still trying to pronounce it.
I've pronounced it GIF. I'm happy to be wrong, though.
GIF is a man's name, short for Gifford.
Okay.
All right. What's your favorite podcast?
Money and Power.
Oh man, see that's why he's a friend of the show.
Good answer.
Oh man, I'll tell you seriously, the one that I listen to religiously is Al Mohler's briefing in the morning.
Oh, very nice.
Joe Rogan.
Hang on.
Okay.
I like Tim Ferriss's podcast. Some of them. I screen them. He has a lot on productivity. Kind of helps me think about a lot of different things. There was also one I actually just picked up today. or yesterday, and I listened.
Rapid fire, Justin. Rapid fire.
Okay, it seems smart. It seems smart. It's actually a sports podcast. It's phenomenal. It was super interesting. It's about it's about the Tour de France and like all the cheating throughout the years and stuff. It's super. You should listen to it if once you get done with it with this podcast. It's great.
All right, final question, and then we'll wrap it. What is one New Year's resolution you have, either business or otherwise?
Wow. Okay, this is too early. Too early. I do all my goal planning between Christmas and New Year's because nobody else is doing anything. I want to travel a couple times this year to different countries. This next year to a couple different countries, and want to quit working so much on nonprofits. So hopefully, hiring some really good people to come in and take some of that off my hands.
Very good, Rob.
So our big push for 2019 is to have enough revolving business in that both of us can jump ship and be full time. But as a rule, I normally don't make New Year's resolutions because it's the lazy way to make goals.
Fair enough. You're a Scrooge on that account as well. Got it.
I mean, 7%, man. 7% succeed. So just being real.
Did you have anything, PJ?
I really wanted to read I really wanted to hit my book goal. I wanted to read 200 books this year, and it's not happening. So I'm probably going to try to set that same goal again this next year, and I'm gonna I'm gonna find whenever Justin returns his Bertie Bear books to the library, I'm gonna go get those, and I'm gonna make that happen in 2019.
I'm gonna set mine to 202 in 2019, just to one up myself and you.
And he's gonna fail to hit that as well.
But that's the goal. I'll be in that 93% that did that.
All right, guys, that wraps up our roundtable. So now it is time for the final segment of the show, the part of the show we love to hate, parting shots. All right, gentlemen, so we're going to pass it to each of you to give one final piece. This could be a piece of wisdom. It could be a rant, a pet peeve, a recommendation, whatever you would like. What do you have? We'll start with Rob.
Yeah, so I finally started reading every fall. It's a bit of a tradition. When John Grisham's new book comes out, I read it. So I'm 95% done with this, and as long as the ending doesn't suck, I'm comfortable with giving it 4.5 stars. So it's called The Reckoning, and it's pretty good.
Very good, Justin.
Okay, I have a rant and I have a piece of advice. First rant is, I know I'm doing two. So
rapid fire, baby. No, I'm just kidding.
Go for it. I like it. Go for it.
I am ranting against the Republican Party and this whole, well, not just the Republican Party, but everyone who is ranting against GM right now and shaming them for restructuring their business. Look, I get it. I understand that whenever there's layoffs, it's a terrible thing. And I totally understand that. However, here's the deal. If GM would have been doing this kind of stuff, restructuring their company before the recession, they might not have gone bankrupt. And so, look, this is it's a business thing. They used to sell more than 50% of their business was in cars. Now it's more than 50% in trucks. And so as a business, you have to restructure. You got to, or you will not make it. So the fact that they're restructuring now and saying, look, we've got to move stuff around, I think that's the business way to do things. I think it's wise. And all these people, including the president, who's shaming them because of their moves, I think it's foolhardy and dumb. So that's my rant. My piece of advice is this. I found this to work extraordinarily well for people. If you want to talk anybody who you want to talk to. So whether it be a politician or a business person or some kind of theological leader you really respect, there's this email that I've worked out that works. That's been working like 95% of the time to get their attention. Okay, so I had dinner with Mark Dever a couple weeks ago. I just sent this email to a billionaire, and I'm meeting with him on the 21st. It's worked tremendously well. And here's how it goes. Basically, you start out with the email and you say, "Hi, my name is Justin." And like literally all I've done is just went and found their email off their websites, and I sent them this email, and then their secretary emails me back. So I don't have any I don't have a lot of prior connection with either one, with anybody I contact. But here's what you do. So you start out, you say, "Hi, my name is Justin Powell, blah, blah, blah." You tell a little bit about yourself. You compliment them on what you really respect about them. I super respect, this or that about you. Here's the deal. I have a couple questions I would like to ask you. Would you be willing to have a 20-minute phone call, 15-minute phone call with me? Here's the questions, and you ask very specific questions of them. That gives them an understanding that you know them well, and that the questions you're asking are good questions, right? So I ask very specific questions, and then what I do is at the end of the email, I say, "Listen, this is who I am, and this is why, if you help me, this is as a result of you answering these questions for me, this is what's going to happen. So I'm involved in a nonprofit. If you can answer these questions for me, this is how I'm going to take this information and knowledge that you gave me and reinvest it into, and it's not only going to help me, it's going to help my business, it's going to help my community, it's going to help people that I mentor, right?" And it is amazing how well that works. And honestly, you need to have good questions though. And you need to have, there definitely needs to be a reason for why you're asking the questions. But it is amazing how many people, super successful people, are willing to give of their time if they feel like they have a knowledgeable person who is going to use what they've learned from you for good. So anyway, that's my rant, and that's my piece of advice.
That's awesome. PJ, what do you got?
Man, I can't even I'm still processing Justin's rant. But yeah, that was awesome. I just, we're talking about entrepreneurial things in this podcast, and I'm thinking about people who might be listening to this, and they're thinking maybe I'm just getting started, and they're probably interested in maybe their own business, or they're chugging along, or they don't really know where to go, or wherever you are in your business process. I was just thinking about something that was so helpful to me, early on, that I didn't really think about, because you don't know what you don't know, right? But I spent $800 or $1,000, and I got 2 or 3 sessions with a business coach, and I was just and the whole thing was here's how to write a business plan, here's what your profit and loss looks like, all these different things. I had no idea what any of that meant, and or anything, and I just thought man, this was so helpful. If I didn't know anything of anything, So, and I'm not saying you have to spend $1,000 to have business coaching lessons, but I guess what I am saying is that if you've got a buddy who's really good in business, or if you've learned about a business consultant or whatever, I would just say that it's worth it to take some time to learn the ins and outs of your profit and loss statements, and kind of the finance end of that, because you might have a great idea, but in terms of setting up all of that stuff and just learning how to do the planning and all those business basics, you may not need a coach, to coach you every month, but as you're getting started, and maybe once a year, or someone that you can call every quarter or every 2 quarters, man, that was so helpful to me. And I just thought that was just something that if I'm just starting out, I would have liked to know someone like a Justin Powell, or who's done it before, or a business consultant, and thank God I was able to do that and sit down with somebody. So if there's someone like that, get some advice, get some good advice, spend some time learning before you jump right in, and it'll just make things so much smoother, because you want to be able to focus on what you're good at in your big idea, right?
That's great advice.
Really good.
That's
advice.
awesome. So my parting shot is a quick recommendation, and that is I just saw a documentary on iTunes called The Bill Murray Stories. I am a huge fan of Bill Murray, and he has a knack for popping up in random places, and he's got all of these just myth-like crazy stories that follow him around, and the documentary looks into tracking them down, and were they true? Is it myth? Is it legend? And it's a lot of fun, and it's like crazy things like someone was at a frat party and they went into the kitchen and Bill Murray's there in an ugly Christmas sweater washing the dishes. Like it's just just the stupidest things, but it's just these little moments in time that he just brings such joy, and he's just in the moment, and it's awesome. And so it's definitely worth a watch. It's the Bill Murray Stories documentary. So that is my parting shot, and that, friends, is the end of the show. As always, for those who are interested, you can learn more about the Infinity Podcast Network at infinitypodcastnetwork.com. We have a lot of great events coming up. We've got a conference coming in February, and you can learn more about that at moneypowerpod.com/conference. That's in February, and we're going to talk about finance, business, politics, culture, and how it all relates to our faith. That's going to be in Mansfield, Ohio, February 23rd and 24th, and we would love to have you come out and see not just the conference, but we're also going to have a live taping of this podcast. So it's going to be a great time, and fun will be had by all. So you can learn more about that on the website, infinitypodcastnetwork.com and moneypowerpod.com. So for that, I am Jeremiah Martin, and for Rob Johnson, for Justin Powell, for PJ Wenzel, and for Nathan Martin, who is no longer with us, just for this week. And that is it, friends. Good night and good luck.
I got the money in the pile. Yeah. Once you get a little, they just want to take you down, cuz we've been going hard for too long. Can't get enough, what is you on?